was a natural for Michael Arrington to do the first Pando Monthly because a lot of this event is sort of inspired by what he used to hold in his living room in the early days of TechCrunch.
And is that where the carpet comes from?
Yeah, yes, this is his carpet from his.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, these are his chairs. No, we got these at IKEA yesterday. Yeah, Ani was going
Rightfully
to chair
so.
shows and kept sending me pictures, and I would be like, that one makes me want to kill someone. I hate that one. I liked this. And not on backorder. So I didn't know who to have for the second Pando Monthly. And, I actually had someone else originally booked. And then when Address Book Gate was...
Always good to be your second choice.
No, I canceled. I canceled him, and you know it. So when Address Book Gate was blowing up, I thought, Dave is going to go into a bunker, and as his friend, I need to pull him out of the bunker. And probably by about the time Pando Monthly will be here, he'll be ready. So it was really, I asked you in the middle of the storm, and you said yes.
Yeah, literally the same day.
Against some of your counsel. So I appreciate you being cool enough to come do this. So I feel like you're sort of the Job of Silicon Valley.
You guys didn't know this was going to be a religious revival, did you?
You came out here, and you have quite an entrepreneurial family pedigree. Your grandfather was one of the Filene's Basement founders,
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
And you moved out here, wanted to work in tech, wanted to start something, wanted to have this great background, so you went to Apple, and then you were early days at Facebook. I mean, it's hard to imagine a better pedigree. Go off on your own. Everyone thinks, turns their attention to this. Ashton Kutcher is tweeting about Path before he gets it. Everyone's paying attention. Great investors. Comes out, nobody uses it.
10,000 people used it.
Was it 10,000? Because TechCrunch reported hundreds of thousands.
Well,
they were
it was about
overestimating.
10,000 DAU. So we had hundreds of thousands of total registered users, but we only had about 10,000 DAU for most of the year. So yeah, I mean, it was broadly failure.
And was that you baked in all of these inherently, and this is something I liked about it. It was a ballsy way to start a company because you baked in, inherently antiviral elements and antisocial elements at a time when people are just, rabidly trying to be obsessively viral. So was it a surprise to you?
The vision hasn't changed much since the beginning. I mean, we wanted to create I used to call it bookmarking your life, sort of a way to use your mobile phone to capture important moments and memories in your life and put them into a path or a journal of your life. And we focused a lot on this idea of a personal network. And the reason that we did that was because as we were building the product, we kept asking people to tell us what they do with their phones. And people have a favorites list on their phone, not that many people on it. Send text messages to a few people, but not hundreds. And people take a lot of photos with their phone, right? And so we kept asking people to show us, like if I asked you to pull out your photo library and show it to me right now, most people will say, let me look at that first before I show that to you.
It's all my baby, so I'd be like, look at this photo.
Yeah. Depends on what stage of life you're in. And it's interesting, people kept saying to us...
My husband and I have been together for 12 years, we don't sext.
Yeah, we're way too old for that world, right? And people just kept telling us that it's way too personal. It's way too personal. I don't share these photos, right? And so the way I sort of was looking at it was that there's this, I was an economics major, so there's this illiquid market of photos and data on all of these phones, and it's not being shared. And that was really interesting. And so we've been really focused on this idea of creating a trusted place to share, sort of a more intimate place to share. And yeah, when we launched it, we actually had a lot of, most of us were from the web era. I spent a lot of time at Facebook. My co-founder, Dustin, mostly built desktop software. Sean Fanning, our third co-founder, most of the things he's built have been on the web. So none of us really knew what we were doing with mobile. at all. And so a lot of what we did with this first version was, we were getting fancy with different network models, and we were creating different flows for capturing photos and adding tags to them, and there were like lots of complicated steps, and we were like, ooh, we're going to put this cool tag in here that's called thing, and it's going to be for some future advertising customer that we don't have yet, right? And we just made a lot of bad decisions. And
did you overbake the product?
Definitely.
Because that was another criticism, is that
Yeah.
you leave Facebook, it's a huge announcement, we don't hear from you for a long time.
Yeah, I think we overthought a lot of things, and we wanted to build this company that was entirely focused on mobile, and we just made a lot of sort of mistakes in terms of how we structured that first product. And it certainly wasn't as successful as we wanted it to be. I went out to New York and I talked to all the reporters, and we launched it in a very big way, and it probably was a little bit ahead of itself.
How much do you think, when you started working on this, you didn't plan on Instagram, right? That was one of the things with Palm, when they were trying to revamp and do the pre, it's like they thought it would be an iPhone pre-world, and they didn't count on Android coming out as strongly as it did. When you guys came out, Instagram was so strong, you were always sort of compared to them, even though you were really trying to do something different.
Yeah.
How did that play a role?
Yeah, we launched within weeks of each other. And actually, nobody remembers this, but there were actually a lot of other players in the market doing photo-related things back then. I think that a lot of people saw this opportunity for creating photo-based social applications because there just weren't any, right? People were keeping all of the photos on their phone. And so there were other players. I think there was one called Treehouse for a while. And there was Pick Please. And there were a bunch of people sort of in the photo space initially, and Instagram definitely took off. And so, yeah, it's interesting because we weren't ever really focused on photos. We were more focused on the network. But yeah, I guess the answer to your question is yes, we were getting compared, still do. But they're very different experiences.
I actually interviewed Kevin at the BI conference yesterday, and he said the second we start being called just a photo app, we've lost. So it seems like both of you are companies, everyone wants to call photo apps, but neither of you want to be photo apps.
Yeah. I think we both started there because at that moment in time, the year before 2010, checking in was really popular on mobile. And then last year, there was a lot of focus on photos, I think mostly because nobody had really done anything there. Back then, a lot of people were talking about, oh, there needs to be a Flickr for mobile or a Facebook for mobile, or, a lot of the web era companies, everyone was sort of talking about, when's the version of that going to happen for mobile? And so I think a lot of people thought, why isn't there a Flickr for mobile? Why isn't there a Facebook for mobile? Why isn't there? And and so I think that's probably why several companies were started across that sort of time period that had to do with that area.
Now I want to talk about your time when you decided to leave Facebook. So you and I have talked about this before, and I've written about it some. Facebook had this really interesting thing happen that most big companies that are kind of the big winner of each wave don't have happen, in that a lot of the early people left well before there was an IPO. Normally at this stage of the process, with Facebook about to go public, everyone would be writing about, okay, the Dustin, the Dave Morin, all these guys are going to leave, and it's like, you guys, a lot of you already left. And a lot of that had to do with how Facebook used the secondary markets and the ability to do so. So what was the decision for you to leave Facebook? Because a lot of people leave Google, after it went public, or leave Yahoo, or left, other companies because it was public. It was no longer as fun. It was, in a different phase. But Facebook was still a startup when you left.
I guess it depends on how you classify a startup. By the time I left, we had close to 2,000 employees. When I joined Facebook, we had around, I think, 5 or 8 million users. And when I left, I think we had 600 or 700 million. So it was a bigger thing. So I guess, I don't know, there's two questions there, I guess. So why, is there a question of why did so many people leave early, or just you want to hear my sort of...
Yeah, really more your story.
Yeah.
I'm assuming a lot of people left because of the difference in liquidity. Facebook essentially had its liquidity event before going public.
Well, I should, answer that first. I think actually a lot of people left because Not because of that necessarily, but because Facebook, for some reason, I think it might have been because social networks didn't exist before Facebook, really. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, we ended up with this high concentration of very entrepreneurially minded people in one place, mm-hmm. working on the same idea at the same time, which I sort of look back on now, even trying to build a company, and say to myself, like, how is it even possible to replicate getting that many people that are sort of entrepreneurial by default to work mm-hmm. on the same project at the same time? Mm-hmm. And I used to look around and just sort of think how lucky I was to be, working with these people who I really looked at thinking like, man, they could be running their own company, right? Mm-hmm. And so you sort of saw this happen where there was, Adam D'Angelo and Charlie Cheever went to start their thing, and Dustin Moskovitz went and started his thing, and Ruchi and Aditya just, they were starting their thing, and now they're over at Dropbox. Like this whole set of people that were there very early on are all sort of very entrepreneurially minded, and so I think that everyone's kind of default is to make things, right? Once a company gets to a certain scale, there's a lot of ideas that have already been made and they need to be scaled. So I sort of got to work on Facebook Platform and Facebook Connect, and when they started there was nobody using them, and by the time I left, there were millions of developers using both of them, and big organizations and all this stuff. And so organizations change. When I left, actually, Mark said something to me that I thought was really great. Anytime you're leaving a job, it's a pretty nerve-wracking experience. And Mark just said to me, I think people come in and out of businesses when they sort of are most interested in that phase. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, that's a pretty interesting way to think about it. Like, people aren't going to always be there. They're going to be interested for some period, and maybe they'll come back. Like, Facebook's actually seen a lot of people go back. So, mm-hmm. Aaron Sittig, who was one of the key designers, if not the designer of Facebook, he left for a while, and he's back. Mark Slee left for a while. He's mm-hmm. one of the great engineers of Facebook, and
some
now
people
he's
may
back.
be acquired back in.
Yeah, and there's different things going on where people go in and out, and so I always appreciated Mark's sort of perspective on that. So I guess that's sort of the first half. The second half is, for me, I had this opportunity to work on these two projects that were really neat and very impactful, and I got this opportunity to work with like a lot of entrepreneurs. So that was guys like Mark Pincus, who mm-hmm. I met with him when he still gives me grief for this to this day. I had coffee with him when he was starting Zynga, and the only employee was his dog, right? And he asked me what he should work on, and he said, should I work on poker or education? And I said, well, education, of course. You're going to end up getting sued by the government if you do poker.
Oh, so it wasn't for any lofty reason of educating children. It was just
no. I mean, I think he actually was legitimately interested in maybe disrupting education, but. Uh-huh. Frankly, I think if he had done that then, it probably would have been too early. Like, mm-hmm. this is the year to start doing education stuff.
I agree.
So we made the right choice, right? And sort of sparked this social games revolution, which has been really interesting. But so I got to work with a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of venture capitalists, and I was always sort of an entrepreneur myself, and the entrepreneurial bug was starting to itch pretty strongly by the time I left. Mm-hmm. And I also was really interested in this. I actually, in the December of 2009, I decided to leave, and I was actually at a wedding in India mm-hmm. for Ruchi, mm-hmm. who's one of
like half of Facebook went to India.
Yeah, we were all in India. It was pretty weird, and I've never been to India. It's an amazing place.
Did anyone get drunk and get piercings or henna tattoos?
No, well, there were henna tattoos, but
they were sober henna.
There was a lot of dancing and beaches, and India's, if anybody's been there, for an American, it's a very disruptive. It really. It shifts your perspective, right?
I spent 6 weeks in India in one stint, my last book, and the advice that I got was, you have to surrender to India. You're in India. You can't try to have India on your terms as an American.
Yeah, I definitely showed up in India and got in a cab, and I'm like, yeah, take me to the hotel. The guy's like, okay, it'll be 3 hours.
My favorite India story was New Delhi, middle of the city, on the freeway, rush hour. We're in insane traffic even by India standards. And we were just we were so slow we might as well have been going backwards. And we were like, this is ridiculous. Elephant in the fast lane.
Yeah. No, dead
I
serious.
was like, this is like a place a child has dreamt up,
Yeah.
but with more trash.
Yeah, like, have you guys seen...
I love India, but it was
what
true.
is it? Is it The Bourne Identity, or it's one of the Bourne movies where they're like doing a car chase through Goa, India?
Are they?
Yeah. And what... Supremacy.
The Supremacy.
Yeah. And I'm in this cab, and I'm, traveling for 30 hours, and I'm like falling asleep. You know when you're like falling asleep and you wake up for a moment, you look around, and there's like elephants on the road, and then like you're in this crazy market, and there's people like surrounding the car, and then I would fall asleep, and like we'd be on the left side of the road, and then the right side of the road. Yeah. And I have this like, it's like a movie dream in my head of this memory. But anyway, so that's a long story to tell you the story.
You were in India, though.
Yeah, I was in India, and somebody sent me Mary Meeker's internet report from that fall, which I think had just happened like in December or something at probably at John Patel's conference, right? And there was a slide in that deck that I still have. It's like printed out on my wall. And it showed the desktop internet sort of flattening out and not growing anymore, and the mobile internet sort of crossing over and becoming dominant in 2013. And I'd been working on Facebook platform for about 3 or 4 years, and sort of seen that it takes about 2 to 3 years for a company to really go from nothing to being really influential and sort of a competitor in the space. And so I sort of thought to myself, okay, it's going to take 3 years to build a company, not just a product, but a company that can sort of be a mobile company, right? And like, I was sort of hoping that somewhere along the way the market would shift and become like more mobile focused then. And so we actually set out to build this company and decided not to make a website and to be entirely focused on mobile, which at the time people were like,
it's a ballsy move.
Yeah, you're kind of crazy. And honestly, I made that decision based on that one slide.
Wow.
And just having like, I kind of thought from having the last, sort of one of the last products that I got to launch at Facebook was Facebook Connect for iPhone. And there was a lot of activity, and people were really excited about it, and there were starting to be games where you could find your friends and stuff. And this all sounds normal now, but it was, at the time, kind of new. And so I just thought, it would be really interesting if there was a company just fully specialized in those small interfaces, right? And so that's what we tried to do. And back to the previous story, the first shot kind of missed. So that's most of the process. But to me, it was a lot about just the entrepreneurial bug. Like, I felt like I'd had the opportunity to do some really neat things and help a lot of people in the world through Facebook. And I just felt like now's the time.
Did you agonize about it, or you just?
Oh yeah, for probably a year. Yeah.
A year?
Yeah.
So what was the thing that finally convinced you? That slide or something else?
Yeah, I think that slide.
Magic of India?
Yeah, India.
You didn't have a fight with someone?
I got engaged right around then, too, after the India trip. I don't know. When you're going through any of these decisions, like any of you that have been through like one of those hard life decisions, right, it like takes actually a really long time to kind of crunch through it, right? And I had been thinking about it for a really long time, and I always knew that that's kind of what I wanted to do. But you're never sure, like, is it now the time? Do I have, you have these like deep insecurities, like, do I have what it takes to go and like build a company and sort of do these things? And so,
when I think that insecurity is hard when you're coming from a company that has a really powerful founder. That was certainly hard for me with coming from TechCrunch.
Yeah.
And I would imagine on a much, much bigger scale.
Yeah, and the thing about Facebook is that it's so, it grows so well, and it's so big, and there's so many things that contribute to that. There's the fact that it's a huge idea. There's all these different people that have built different products, and people that have done marketing and partnerships. And there's so many like decisions that are made along the way. And now it's this big monolith, right? And nobody really knows what they did that made it successful, right? Like, so when you're inside of one of those things, you sort of are like, yeah, I like got to work on this project or this one or whatever, but you're never sure that like anything you did actually like made the thing successful, because it's kind of just a freak of nature, right?
Well, but don't you think this is why so many people always feel like they have to do it again? It's that
Yeah,
whole once
sure.
you're lucky, twice you're good thing, which is what I called my first book, because everyone that I talked to had that anxiety of, well, if I could reproduce it again, then it's me, and it's not the timing, and it's not this. But then if you don't, well, then was it you that you failed? To me, this is the
Certainly.
whole magic of Silicon Valley.
Certainly. Yeah, the answer is yes, right? And I think it manifests, when I was at Apple, actually the day I left Apple, Steve Jobs was giving a speech. He was doing a town hall or whatever. And he said something that stuck with me for like a really long time. It's like, if you do something and it turns out pretty good, don't dwell on it too long, just move on and do the next thing. Which I always that's sort of become like a quote to live by.
Yeah.
And so, so there were sort of dual things going on. There's like this great insecurity being part of Facebook. Is it possible to go do something even remotely as big as this?
Right.
And then there's this other thing, which is like, well, that was good, and you could sort of probably dwell on that for your whole life, right? But why not just keep making, right? For me, the entrepreneurial process is a lot about just it's a process, right? And you have to stay in it and keep trying, right? And maybe you fail, right? And I think actually a lot of people that left Facebook, whether it was Chris Hughes and Jumo or even Quora, right? A lot of people you go through this great expectations wall, right? Where people expect Facebook overnight and forget that even Facebook only had 1 million users the first year.
Right.
Right.
So I went back and read your blog post about when you left, and you said you opened it by saying following your dreams is perhaps the most important thing to do in life. Was your dream path, or was your dream starting a company?
Both.
And it wound up being path.
I think both. I've always loved since I was in college. I built a lot of web software. I had a little consulting company while I was in college. I built websites. I was in a gaming clan. I built websites for everything. Total dork. I played a lot of Unreal Tournament. And I really liked web publishing. I was the editor of my school newspaper when I was in high school.
I was too.
Yeah.
You've done better with it than I have.
So I always liked laying out news. I don't know about that.
Let's compare bank accounts in a couple months.
It's not about the bank account, Sarah. Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's my only IPO joke I'll make.
All right. And so I've always liked laying out things and publishing and sort of writing. And so back in college, I used to obsess over this idea of blogs and how crazy this is, and sort of how all this thing was going. I got a Blogger account, first Blogger account, and so I've always kind of been interested in this. And Facebook was sort of and Apple was the company that was sort of making technologies which help people create things, and then Facebook was sort of this new way of thinking about blogging in my mind. If you remember
the original news feed was really modeled off the AP. This goes back to Mark's relationship with Washington Post and all that.
Exactly. And Facebook to me, not everyone in the world was blogging. Same as not everyone uses Twitter now, right? People who are telling stories, building brands, use blogs, right? And I always thought Facebook was this interesting way to get everyone else to blog, right? Because you would make this profile and then you'd change stuff on your profile, and that would create stories. And so it was a way for the whole world to blog. And so I've always kind of been interested in this idea of sharing and internet companies, right? So whether or not Path was this long-term vision, I guess, over 10 years or something, probably not. But starting at a great internet company was always kind of my goal.
I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, the path makes more sense when they look back on it.
Yeah, I couldn't have told you 5 years ago that this is where I'd be.
But it's looking back, it's kind of brick by brick.
Yeah, totally. I think it's true, right? When you're starting a company, you sort of look around and you say, okay, clearly mobile phone, in my case, it was okay, clearly mobile phones, the iPhone seems interesting right now. Social networks have evolved about 5 years, probably a lot more to go there. There'll be there's a lot of sensors on the iPhone that weren't there before. You kind of just look at, it's like any type, if you're building a bench, right? Or if you're making anything, if you're crafting anything, you sort of look around at what materials are available, and then you're okay, I'm going to take some of that wood and some of this wood and these nails or whatever, right? And you're going to build this chair, right? And you can sort of do that based on the materials that have been built before, and then you move on. And so that's really, if you're going to build an internet company, just like when Apple started and, Steve and Steve were like, let's build computers, right? They sort of looked around and put all the components together in the best way that they could, right? And so to me, like, starting path was like, I want to build an internet company, so like, let's find all the pieces that make sense for today and like build that.
Did you have a relationship with Steve Jobs?
Limited, not a very personal one at all. I've like, I met him a few times working at Apple. When we were at Facebook, we did a lot of business with Apple and Steve, but it wasn't a super personal relationship.
I mean, you mentioned what he said at the All Hands. Anything else that you learned from him, or ways that he impacted your career?
I'm now getting bummed that he died. I think that one quote that I said was pretty powerful. Just because the thing about Apple, right, is that if you think about the iPhone, right, the iPod was like this huge thing, right? When I joined Apple, we couldn't sell iPods to anyone, which is funny. And then the iPod became this massive worldwide phenomenon. And then Apple basically is okay with saying, okay, we're done with that, like, shoot it, and then, let's go build the iPhone, right? And that's like
each
really
of their products
hard.
could have been a huge public company in and of itself.
Yeah. And then they're okay with saying, okay, that was of its time, put it on the shelf, and let's move on, right? And I think that that's like incredibly hard, right? Whether you're a designer, an engineer, an entrepreneur, like, you fall in love with ideas, right? And you want to like keep going, and sometimes some of them don't work, right? Or sometimes they've had their run. And sometimes you need to cannibalize yourself in order to...
Sometimes you have to kill it before the market.
The innovator's dilemma, right? And I always really respected Apple and Steve, Apple still to this day, for the ability to kind of just move on and do the next thing. Because it's often really hard to do. I guess the other thing about Apple that I always appreciated was this idea that designers and engineers and marketers, that it kind of takes all people to make something successful. Like, I always really appreciate, like, I was in marketing roles mostly at Apple, and I would walk into a meeting and it would be engineering and design and executives and marketing people, and there was mutual respect amongst all camps, right? Whereas you go to some companies, you see a far lopside one way or the other.
Do you think you guys had that at Facebook? It's a very engineering-centric
It's pretty
company.
engineering-driven. Design was also... I would say Facebook's more engineering driven, slightly design driven, and then there are no marketers, right? And so Apple, I always really appreciated that kind of mutual respect amongst all the different camps, and I think that drives this, like, because everyone knows that without the brand and without the design and without the great engineering, we couldn't be this, right? And I think that's pretty great. And then I guess the other thing that is pretty great about Apple is this idea of focus, putting more wood behind less arrows, right? Like, the idea that when you launch a product, like, I remember I got there right after the first iMac, and I remember hearing this story of how when they launched the first iMac, there was only one, and there was like this huge debate internally about, like, we should launch 3, and like, we've always done it that way. And Steve basically said, no, we're only launching 1, and the reason we're doing that is because we want the whole world to have the same experience first, right? And then after that, we'll launch 5 colors, and then we'll put a new OS in it and all this stuff. And so it's funny, you see this play out over time, right? Like, when the iPhone launched, for like the first year, everyone's like, why isn't there a platform? Why isn't it, have all these features? Why is it only one color? And it's a classic Apple strategy to say, there's only one version of this. Here's all the features. And for a year, everyone in the world has the same experience, and then we'll make it a platform, and then we'll make it 5 colors, right? And so this idea of sort of focusing on a singular product and telling the story with a good name and getting it out there, I think that that's something, it's like really hard to do, right? It's like really hard to focus in on like one thing, one feature list, one message, one name, because you have to make a lot of choices. And so I always have like kind of appreciated that.
Extreme simplicity, you have to be right.
Yeah. And so, but like, Apple failed too, right? Like there's this there's stories of like the Cube, and there's a lot of little things all along the way where they've just like badly missed, right? Yeah, I mean, the original Apple TV really didn't do that well. There's lots of stories of it not working out. But even the Mac, and people actually had forgotten this story until the biography came out. The Mac was actually a pretty dismal failure for like the first year or two. And in fact, one of the reasons Steve was ousted entirely in the end was because of the Mac's failure. And we look around today, we're like, what? The Mac failed? Like, that's crazy, right? And so I think that's, and I guess that also tells another story, which is that Apple knows, and part of the Apple culture is that great things take time. You can't make magic happen in a week, right? And it's interesting, if you go and read Steve Jobs' biography, you see these grand periods of time in between the beginning of a project and the end of a project, and we're talking like 5 years sometimes. And so it's like a really interesting, I think that good things take time, they take good process, they take a focus. Apple never interacts with the market. It's really interesting, right? You don't see them at conferences, right? And the reason why is because they stay in the house and they try to crunch through problems, because true simplicity takes a lot of time and a lot of focus.
I want to talk about the Google offer, and I'm hoping you're actually going to talk about it. I know I went back and read so much stuff that has been written about you, and I know it disrupted last year. Jason tried and tried, and you didn't say anything, but we're sort of in Mike's living room here, so it's all friends. As we reported, I'm going to tell you what I've heard, and you can tell me which is accurate. Or you can tell us your own story.
I can neither confirm nor deny anything you're about to say.
You got to say something. Come on. It was years ago at this point. I know you can't say it at the time, but it was years ago.
I got to keep my word.
125 million. And there was something that Jason said on stage at Disrupt, which was the reason you didn't want to go there was because Google had a clause they could fire you at any time. I actually don't believe that was the reason. What I heard, and I heard this, I heard this from Dustin Mosowitz, who is one of your investors. He said that he talked a lot about the conversations the two of you had during that period, and I think the two of you went and you were holed away in a cabin or something like that over the weekend, and he said that you were really in agony about it, and you had a lot of pressure from people to sell, but you didn't want to do it. And you didn't leave Facebook to start something and sell, 7-9 months later?
Yeah.
Was it the terms? Was it that? Or what was it?
I think that I've always wanted Path to be a long-term company. And, one of the things that Mark and Dustin were so good at Facebook was sort of keeping the company focused on this longer-term thing. And I think in Silicon Valley today, you get a lot of pressure, and Dustin actually, I think he talked about this on stage too, I think whenever he was doing that interview, just that there's a lot of short-term thinking right now, where it's build up a little company, sell it to, there's a bunch of big buyers right now, right? And that's certainly one way you can go, and there's nothing wrong with it, right? If you want to do that, sure, go for it, right? I have no opinion against you on that, but I think that there's room in the market for true long-term innovation, right? Where you focus on an idea, a problem set, and you really try to get through it and innovate and build things that take a while, right? And at Path, we've always wanted to do that. We really wanted to, this problem we're trying to solve of getting people connected to the right people all the time, where you feel like you can trust it, that you're connected to your family first and then your closest friends, and it's this place where when that app icon comes forward, you feel like you can trust it and the design, and there's all these little things that go into this. If we had sort of launched it and then we got 10,000 users, and no matter who came along and said we want to buy you or you should stop, right? And then you're just sort of giving up, and you're not sort of staying true to your vision, right? I really believe that when you start a company, you generally have some kind of a vision, right? You see something, right? You wouldn't start a company if you didn't see something out there, right? And oftentimes the process of getting to that is just kind of going through the failure and kind of living in it and trying to figure out what the lessons are and what the signals are and what are people trying to do with the product and sort of unlocking it as much as you can. And you know, stopping super early just seems like you would have spent all this time building up a company that you know is the first year. I mean, you know this. You're going through it right now. The first year of building a startup is like really hard, right?
We've been live 2 months, and it feels like 2 years.
Yeah, and it's like there's little things like, you know, you have to get toilet paper for the bathroom, you know, and you have to pay people's paychecks, and you have to raise money, and you have to build the product, and there's like all these things, and you have to figure out if you're getting along with your co-founders, and you know, there's like all these things that happen in the first year, which are like, you know, to sort of like get it all together and like on the path to where you can even launch a product, like that's even hard to get through, right? A lot of startups fall...
Getting funding is hard to get.
Yeah, and it's like a lot of startups fall apart before they even get there, right? And so the way I look at it is like every month you keep going, it's like the amount of time you've spent getting to that point is like what you would sacrifice if you were to quit or sell or whatever. And there's a lot of option value there, right? Like you've got an organization, you've got ideas, you've got vision, you've got people that are sort of there working with you, right? And so the opportunity to keep going, I think, is a hard one to get, right? Like it takes a lot of work to even get to any vantage point that you're at, right? And you can, of course, always look at the downside, right? Which is like, well, you know, if this, that, or that other thing happened, maybe the company fails and all this stuff. But I think at the end, you just have to believe in yourself and like keep going and participate in the process. And, you know, I think for us, look, we've only been doing this for 2 years or whatever, and we want to build this thing for family that everyone in the world has a family, right?
Did you just hear my baby?
Yeah.
I was like, who brought a baby to this?
I guess I should say we were getting a lot of these emails from people. Even when we only had those 10,000 DAU, they were just saying to us over and over, I've never had a place where I can share photos of my baby every single day with my family. My family's all over the world, and you know, my family feels more connected than it's ever felt. Like I'm back in my uncle's life again. I'm back in my sister's life again. We were hearing this from all kinds of people, and so, you know, every day, and now we hear that chorus stronger and stronger, right? And so that's, I guess, what drives us forward.
What's your advice for entrepreneurs out there if they're, you know, lucky enough to be in a situation where someone's offering them a lot of money to sell a company? Some people in their team want them to take the deal. Investors may want them to take the deal. I've talked to Dustin about this. I've talked to the core guys. A lot of the early Facebook people have said that moment when Mark turned down Yahoo and going through that left a huge impact on them. You know, you've now been through that with Facebook and with your own company. So what's your advice to someone who feels in their gut, I want to keep doing this, but everyone's telling them they're crazy?
You have to keep going.
But how do you make that argument to your investors? How do you stand strong? How do you I mean, beyond sort of like how do you tactically work through that?
I think that you have to, obviously you have to look at the data. I think if you have a product that like 10,000 people in the world are using, like on a daily basis, which is a lot. I do some angel investing, and I see this happen a little bit, where you end up in this sort of steady state where there's actually like a big chunk of people that are using it on a daily basis. You've got something, right? And oftentimes it's just too complicated. It's not simple enough. Like the idea is not pure enough yet. And so there's partly saying, well, like, guys, we have something here, because there's like, you know, there is a segment of people using this. I mean, clearly we need to do some stuff to figure out what it is that we need to do to like get more people. But so I think that's part of the argument, which is if your customer service queues are saying nice things and you have a small user base and it's active on a daily basis, there's something there. I think that, you know, I read this book. Have you read this book, Thinking Fast and Slow, by Daniel Kahneman? It's on the New York Times bestseller list right now. He won the Nobel Prize in happiness economics, and he talks about how the brain has two modes, basically. You call it the conscious or the subconscious or whatever. and that the subconscious brain actually has something like 20,000 times the computational power of your conscious brain. And so that idea of following your heart or following your intuition, the subconscious brain actually produces feelings, which then you have to interpret with your conscious brain, which I think is really interesting. Like, you know, for people working in tech, your gut's smart, right? And so oftentimes you're looking at it, and if you like feel like you're like, no, this isn't right, like your brain's actually processing way more information than you think. And so your gut is actually telling you the right thing. Now, your gut might actually be telling you the other thing, which is to like get out, you know, there's bad relationships in the company, or there's, you know, the product maybe really isn't working, and I think you have to follow that too. But if it's telling you like keep going, then it's a social problem, right? Where it's like you have to communicate really clearly, this is the vision, here's the data, you know, we're doing a long-term thing here, and we've just barely gotten started, right? And I think you really have to sell that you're in it, right? Because if you don't, then basically you'll end up getting pressured into something, into the other outcome, right? So I guess maybe those are some of the things. I'm trying to think of other things that are really useful.
Well, I mean, part of it might just be having the right people around the company from the beginning. I mean, you had someone like Dustin who was like, go long. Yeah,
I mean, I think when you're choosing investors, you always want to choose people that you like working with, that you can trust. And that's one of the things actually that I try to be incredibly transparent with my board and my investors. And you know, in the early days, you usually have some angel investors around. You don't have like a really official board yet or anything like that. Now I've got a board, so you tend to communicate with the board rather than the whole investor base. But early on, you're sort of, there's people that are calling you every day and they want to help you. And I think the hardest thing for anyone in that situation is you're trying to communicate everything that's going on. And at the end of the day, it's your brain that's got to make the decision, and you're the one that has to know.
Yeah. So you guys relaunched Path. Everyone loves it. Everyone's going crazy. You're now vindicated. You shouldn't have sold. You're great. Everything's wonderful. Then there's a Singaporean blogger who discovers this issue with the address books. Where were you when that news hit, and what was your immediate reaction?
Well, so the interesting thing was we had actually launched a better version of this the week before on Android. And we were actually working towards shipping it on an iPhone on a Friday, and that hit on a Thursday. And so we knew this was something that
what was the better version?
The better version was just, in Android, they have a single authentication dialog where when you install the app, you can ask for a bunch of permissions. And so they've sort of made it all one dialog. Apple's the other way, which is many dialogues of confirmation. And so the Android way we had already shipped, and it was all good. On the iPhone, actually, there was no precedent for this, and there were no dialogues or anything, so we were just designing our own. And so we were about to ship it, which was kind of the bummer thing. So I guess my reaction was, all right, we better ship it like now. But I think I should rewind and just say, you know, the reason why we designed it this way was not for any nefarious intent or anything like that. We designed it this way because at Path, our sort of highest order bit is simplicity, like you've heard me talk about it now a lot. And what we wanted to do with Path was to connect people to the right people on the network, not just any people. So most social applications, you know, you join, and it's like, welcome to insert name here. Here's a friend finder for you to find your friends and to connect to your friends on the network. And if we sort of provided people with a general friend finder, then the graph would be constructed in a way that's very generic and would map to the same graph that, you know, every other social app that came before it. And so we had actually developed an algorithm which could look at Facebook data and contact data and try to guess who we think your family is and who your close friends are. And then so that was the goal, is to make our new user experience magical, where as soon as you join and you type in, first name, last name, put in a photo, the very next screen you would see a list of people that are either on the network or that you should invite, who are the right people. And so that's the experience we were designing. And like I said, there was actually no precedent for this particular type of data. And so, we didn't have an opt-in. We just did what everyone else was doing, which doesn't make it the right thing, right?
But when you were developing it, was there discussion inside the company of this might freak people out? Should we do this? Should we not do this?
No, I mean, that's the thing, is that it was just sort of like the way the industry, everybody was doing it. And so it was just one of those things where we just did what we've done before, right? And so it wasn't there was no conversation. And it was just like, that's how you implement this feature, right? And so that's the answer, yeah.
I mean, I think what's so interesting about this, and I think one of the reasons people reacted the way they did is, you came from Facebook, and the Achilles heel of Facebook has always been privacy, over and over again. And it's, I remember when Mark was first telling me about the news feed, and I mean, my immediate reaction was like, wow, that's a lot of personal data you're shoving out there. Are you worried about people's reaction? And he looked at me like I was insane. And he was like, no, we're not worried about it. People have entered this. Why would it be an issue? I mean, there's a part of Mark that just doesn't understand why people get freaked out by these things. And I think that's why it keeps coming up again and again for them. Now, you come out of that, and you were frequently a guy smoothing over a lot of those things for Facebook. You come out of that, you start what is, in a lot of ways, the antidote to how big Facebook got and how big our circles got. And you were this company all about, as you were saying earlier, I can trust you by showing me your phone.
Yeah.
And so, like, coming from you, I think it felt like so much more of a betrayal to people.
Yeah. Well, I think the interesting thing here is that we didn't perceive it as that, right? Which is that's the interesting problem, right? Where I think when you're doing software engineering and building user experiences for mobile today, you have a client and you have a server, and the client has some computational power and the server has other computational power, right? And so in order to deliver the experience that we wanted to, we had to put the data on the server in order to run the computation that we wanted to. And that's a pretty normal thing to do. You transfer things from the phone to the server all the time in this sort of type of engineering that we're doing. And so, I don't know if I don't think we knew how people really, we didn't expect this sort of reaction. We were actually proactively, like I said, creating this experience, not because we were afraid of a massive reaction like that. We just thought it was the right thing to do, right? Like there was this, sort of best practice way of doing it, and we kind of thought like, oh, it's probably not the right way to do it because we are so focused on privacy. That's like the great irony of this, right?
Yeah.
And probably why we're in the position that we are on this, because people expect this from us, right? And so I think that, it was one of those things where I think we just ended up in the position that we did, and it wasn't intentional. And one of the interesting things is, the way that we actually store data, whether it's your photos that you post on Path or anything that you transfer. Since day one of our original launch, we'd been doing it over SSL. We store everything in a very professional way. Like I have guys on my team who actually did the infrastructure work at Facebook. I mean, these guys are the best in the world at what they do, and so we take it all very seriously. And so the bummer about this is that due to the user experience, it didn't appear that way. And so that's sort of the unfortunate thing. So,
at the time, did you fear it would tank the company, or did you know it would blow over? You'd been through scandals at Facebook before that felt huge.
I think that if we didn't handle it the right way, it would probably maybe tank the company, right? I don't know if tanking the company, I think it would certainly slow us down quite a bit, meaning that, we would end up having to, I don't know, there's a variety of things that could happen, right? But we care a lot about doing the right thing, right? And so what we did was immediately, literally the next day, ship a new version, worked with Apple to do that. We also, we actually took it a step further on our own accord. We decided to delete all of the data that was acquired beforehand. And actually, I haven't announced this anywhere yet, but we're actually in our next version going to be encrypting all of the data. We're hashing all of the, so if you do upload your contacts to find your friends, we're going to hash the data and then store it so that even if somebody was to hack into our servers or anything was to happen, like everything's safe. We can't access it, only you. So we're pretty excited about doing that because we're going to be one of the first ones to do that. And so, yeah, to us, it's about doing the right thing, right? Like, we actually really do care about this. So, we've got a contract signed with Trusty, so we're having them coming in. It's not done yet; it'll take a while, but we'll have that in place for auditing. We're hashing the data. We're also working with John Herring and the Lookout guys to try to maybe put together a privacy consortium of some kind. I think that one of the realities of all of this is that the mobile industry, mobile computing is effectively the future at this point, right? And throughout the building of the computer industry, there are many standards bodies and consortiums that were put together to talk about standards and the ways to do this. And if you remember early on in Microsoft's history, there was like this era where ActiveX became this really bad problem, and then there were all these dialogues, and there's each time we go through this, at Facebook even, we went through a variety of different ways of authenticating people into the applications and different dialogues and multiple dialogues, all these things. And so I think that what's happening with mobile right now is that I think all of the developers in Silicon Valley just had this like grand realization that the level of communication and user experience design that we have to put into explaining how these experiences work, what goes to the server, what doesn't, these things which were typically considered to be very technical, they need to be explained in a very simplified way, in educational way, and we need to interface probably with the market a little bit more to understand like what should the standards be, because I really just believe that there was no standard here until we hit this.
Business Week reported that Tim Cook called you into his office and screamed at you. Did that happen?
Tim and I have a good relationship,
Don't start no commenting now. You've been so good.
No, I mean, look, I interact with Tim a lot. Like, Apple was very gracious about this thing. They helped us get the app through the store. They've been very gracious, and I think they're learning too, frankly. When we were doing Facebook platform, like, we went through all these different phases, right? Like, I always joke that the worst of all points in the Facebook platform's history was when this meme went around the internet showing what if Mario Brothers was created in 2009, and it had like Mario getting a power up, and then it like had do you want to share this on Facebook, like over the top? And I remember talking to Mark about it, just being like, dude, this is bad. But that's, and the same thing happened to Windows back in the day, right? Where, when ActiveX became this horrible problem in the early 2000s, they started putting all these dialogues, and I can't remember which versions of Windows it was, but it was like you had to literally like click through dialogues like every other window. And, that's like the place where we don't want to get.
Yeah.
And so, I think that everyone's, learning in real time, literally.
You guys seem to have bounced back from it. You're, according to press reports, raising a new round of money. I assume you're not going to comment on it. Would you like to prove me wrong? You could not comment on that one.
Yeah,
I told you before. I have to ask or they'll revoke my journalistic cred. But as an entrepreneur who's been there, I know you're not going to comment on it.
Yeah.
But you've bounced back.
Yeah.
You launched some new stuff that went pretty well. You forced me to live blog it. You did. I mean,
she complained.
So I did loudly.
I'm
sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest initiatives for us for the first half of this year has been our API, and we're working with Nike. They're our first partner, and they're this fun, amazing new gadget called the Fuel Band, which helps you kind of track your daily activity and gives you just a slight bit more data about your day to sort of help you think about, like I'm happy I've hit my goal for the day. And I walked a lot today, so, their goal is really pure and really interesting in my mind, and we have a very strong values and vision alignment. We really care about quality. Nike really cares about quality, and they, their vision is to, give people the technology that their athletes have, right? And to take this amazing technology, they have like wind tunnels and crazy stuff that elite athletes have, but to bring that down into a consumer sort of computing experience that you can wear, and get just a slight bit more data about whether it's your day or maybe the runs that you're going on, to sort of help motivate you and to help you sort of achieve your goals. And so with Path, that's been a big piece of it for us too. We've always, it started with photos, but to us it's always been about this like great vast amount of personal data that's coming off of the phone. And so working with Nike to be one of their first partners has been really fun. And we've done some really neat custom UI and some touch-based interfaces for their running maps, and we're going to roll out the FuelBand integration in a couple weeks, and so we're really excited about it.
I've told you, this makes me feel bad about myself because I have about 20 pounds of pregnancy weight to lose, and I sit on my couch blogging all the time.
Yeah. That's what it's all about.
I hate that other people have running maps. Yeah. I have like 2 more things I want to ask you about, and then I want to open it up to some questions. So we've got a microphone stand there. If anyone like thinks of anything and you want to go over there, I have just like 1 or 2 more things. The first one, going back to what I was saying about you've bounced back. So do you believe there's no such thing as bad publicity?
No. That's like a really hard thing, especially now, right? Like in social media, I was reading this article today where Bloomberg was saying how social media is making it really hard to do long-term initiatives for a city, which I think is really interesting, right? Like, I think social media has this great power to, create memes that move really quickly and change opinions really fast, and that's kind of the world that we live in, and so I think that some publicity is probably, it's always good to get publicity for whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's a book or a startup or whatever, but I think if you make mistakes, it certainly knocks you down a peg, right? Like it hurts your brand. I don't think you can argue with that, right? And there's different audiences and things like that, but
don't you
I think you do have to recover.
The right way, it helps your brand
more? It certainly does. I don't know if it helps it more. I think if you don't respond the wrong way or the right way, then you end up going down pretty fast. I think if you respond the right way, all that really buys you is the ability to make some more good decisions in the future, right? And so our responsibility, or anyone's responsibility going through making any type of mistake, is that you do the right thing, and then you keep doing it, right? Because if you don't, then people know not to trust you. Right? And so it's a series of actions that makes all the difference, not just one in isolation. And so I think that's often, I think, that's the challenge, right? Because if you truly have good intentions, then people will see it over time, right? But so all I can really do is just keep, ensuring that we keep going that way.
So last thing, when the second version of Path came out, a lot of people said, this is no longer a photo app, this is trying to be a better designed Facebook for your phone. Is that a compliment, or does that make you cringe? Because Facebook has a pattern of, if anyone gets too big and going up against them, they tend to launch something or tweak their own site to sort of crush them. That would be a formidable thing if you really were making strides towards being the better Facebook for your phone.
Like I said, we've always thought of Path as this journal, or this. I've always thought of it as like your path through life, right? And we've really tried to make Path into sort of a home. Like the idea, I really believe that, Facebook's an identity platform. We built it to be this big, broad identity platform. It's a social network, right? It's a place where you go and you socialize with friends. You have events like this. You socialize in some smaller groups, some bigger groups, but it's mostly a social network. And it's not designed for family. It's not designed to be something good for your neighborhood. It's not designed to help you meet people that are near you. And so I really kind of believe that now that we built Facebook out to be this big general social network, we all know how everyone's connected, right? And I actually believe there's a huge opportunity to build things on top of that now. And really, I authentically believe that. And what we're trying to do is sort of for family, right, and your closest friends, and that's sort of horizontal. We're not interested in acquaintances. We're not interested in building anything to help you talk to tens of thousands of people. We're only interested in building your family dinner table, right, where you feel like the design of it is warm, it's colorful, it feels like a home, right? If Facebook sort of built the cities and the town squares, like we're trying to build the homes, right? And a big part of the endeavor of Path 2 is also just trying to figure out what is it that people are trying to do with this product, and unlocking that. And so we spent a lot of time just like talking to users and looking at, what are people doing with the app. And we actually, we did start with photos, but we found that people were actually screenshotting lots of different apps and uploading them into their Path. So they were screenshotting the iPod, and they were screenshotting the yellow Notes app and like putting poems in there and stuff, and screenshotting like the Nike Plus running app, screenshotting sleep graphs and game achievements and those kinds of things. And so we sort of knew that there was a set of things that people really wanted to put in their Path, but we were making it incredibly hard for them to do it.
Right.
And so a big part of Path 2 is just sort of, if I learned anything from Facebook, if people are trying to do something with your product, like help them do it, right? Like early on at Facebook, we only had, there was no photos, right? It was just a single profile photo, and people were changing it a lot. In fact, they were changing it so much that it was, they're changing it multiple times a day. Like, that's like more times than people are changing their clothes.
Right.
So we were like, that's pretty crazy. A lot of people don't remember this, but the wall was originally just a wiki. And people started leaving messages on it, and then they started leaving statuses on it. It's like wall and status came out of that. And, the endeavor of, I think, building a social product is often like people start hacking,
What's
right?
like Twitter? I mean, at replies and hashtags.
Yeah. And so I think that that's why I say if you have 10,000 users, they're doing something, right? And so even Groupon, right? Like people don't remember this, but Groupon was a political organizing SMS service. And you could like get your friends together and like blast a message out to them. Or I'm not exactly sure how the experience worked, but it was something like that. And they looked at the data and how people were using it, and it turned out that people were finding local drink deals and blasting it out to everybody. And they were like, ooh, that could be a product.
Turned out it was.
Yeah.
All right, anyone, questions? Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know there were two mics.
Hard to see, but...
What is going on over there? Ani, what are you
we
doing
can't
to that
see
poor
anything,
girl?
so...
Is the mic working? Yes.
I was just wondering if or how, or if you're thinking of trying to make any connections to Asia. You mentioned your trip to India. China especially would be difficult with these types of access issues. I was just wondering what your thoughts are on connecting to an Asian market, or connecting people with families abroad, or how that might look or work, or again, if you are doing that.
Good question.
Yeah, so Japan's actually our #2 fastest growing country right now. And we actually are quite big in Singapore, Thailand, China. Honestly, we have a much faster growing Asian user base than we do Western Europe, which is kind of interesting. And we are internet. We have, I think, 12 languages live right now. We don't have simplified Chinese, but simplified Chinese is going out in the next release. So we're actually actively internationalizing. And we started out initially in those first, I think the first 10, 12 languages were they were translated using a more computer-centric approach, and we just switched over to this platform called Smartling, which is really great. It's much like what we did at Facebook, where you can provide your users with the opportunity to translate. And so we've actually just rolled that out 2 weeks ago. It's at translate.path.com. So anyone can help translate Path into their local language. And so it's actually been awesome. We actually translated into simplified Chinese in 4 days.
Wow.
Which is pretty cool. And so we'll be rolling out a lot more languages really swiftly now. And they'll be a lot more accurate. A funny story was actually in France. We were translated incorrectly into, I think the smile or the heart, the word was wrong, and it meant like go screw yourself or something like that.
Wow. Was that an accident?
Yeah, it was a complete accident. Like the computer did the translating the first time, and we didn't have a local do it. And
it's an angry computer.
I can't remember what it was. It was something to that
Siri?
effect. You know, it was like, and apparently it became this meme, and the French are not happy with us. So.
Right. That's okay.
But a reporter actually from France, from Wired, actually called, and she helped us translate it correctly. So we're in good shape.
I hope you sent her a T-shirt or something.
Oh yeah, yeah.
All right, another question. Looks like there's some guys over here.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
So how does a Path look to different platforms and prioritize, so like Android versus Windows to iOS?
It's a good question.
And what about BlackBerry? Yesterday, Kevin Systrom insisted they're developing for BlackBerry. I was like, you're lying. I called him out, and he was like, no, what I'm saying is it's an important platform. And I was like, let me do what Steve Colbert says, and say everything you're really thinking as you're saying it.
We are actively not developing for BlackBerry.
All right, see? This is the honesty platform.
Yeah. We love the iPhone. We're half the companies from Apple, and I really believe the iPhone is sort of one of the greatest things happening to humanity right now. So we like iPhone a lot. And iPhone is actually 80% of the market right now. So I would say actually 80% of our resources are dedicated towards iPhone. We actually spent a good chunk of last year recruiting for Android. It's turned out to be very hard to find people that are specialized in Android. And so we actually ended up just looking for Java engineers that were really talented. We actually ended up with a guy from Cisco who was actually a switch router engineer, and he's turned out to be incredible. And so our Android team, we actually have 3 now. And so that's kind of how we think about it, is mostly iOS and Android. We're also beginning work on Windows Phone, mostly because we believe that the product is really good. I don't know if any of you guys have played with a Windows Phone, but it's actually quite impressive.
Is it impressive because it came from Microsoft? I mean, I'm actually not trying to be funny.
I think it's impressive despite the fact.
But you know what I mean? Was there such a low bar?
Well, they could have just copied everybody else, right?
Right.
And used their cache and their distribution power to put a,
You mean Google Plus?
No. I mean, they could go and do something similar to Android and iPhone, right? They both have icons and apps and all this stuff. But Microsoft actually, I think what they're doing is really bold. You know, they actually are throwing out the old Windows interface. And they're doing this live tile thing, and this really interesting Metro interface. And I actually think it's a super bold. I mean, again, back to the earlier thing, like being okay with kind of throwing out the old stuff. They're moving on, and so I have a lot of respect for them for that. And so, it's not going to be a huge resource dedication, but we'll start there. I would actually say that iPad is probably if I was to stack rank, it's probably like iPhone, Android, iPad in terms of how we're thinking about things right now.
What about on the design end of things, with these platforms having such different and unique designs, especially Windows? So much of what Path is that unique iOS design. How much does it change to those different platforms?
I think you have to hire a full-time designer for each platform.
Individual.
Yeah. And we have actually a 3-person design team. One of the guys focuses entirely on Android, actually. And so that's why, the Android experience, and especially, we're pretty much almost complete parity now on both platforms. And that wouldn't have happened, wouldn't even remotely have happened had we not had a full-time Android, or a full-time product designer, which is working on Android, I should say. He also does great iOS work, but he sort of chose to do the Android. And then we have one designer who works entirely on web. And so he does all of our permalinks, and we think about the web in terms of syndication and distribution of content, and so he specializes in all that stuff. And then my co-founder actually does all the iOS design.
I want to give a quick shout out while you're doing that. So we are starting to do these people lists. I don't know if you guys have read about them. They're these 5 people lists, and tomorrow we're putting up our first one, and it's about iOS magicians, so both developers and designers who've done great stuff. Next week we're doing an Android magicians list, and we're having a harder time finding people. So if anyone knows a great
Not clear
Android
there are any.
magician, please email amanda@pandodaily.com, because we want to find 5 amazing people.
And then email them to us, because I'll hire them.
You'll read about them on Pando. I know, when I told Dave about this, he's like, no one's going to want to participate. You're going to be surfacing all of our great internal candidates for poaching.
Yeah.
That means you have to pay them more, which is good. That's our goal. I think we've got another question about Kate. Sorry.
That is actually fair.
Hi, I have a question. What do you think the role of emotion is in social networking going forward? I mean, a picture contains a lot of emotional data which can be misinterpreted or may convey the wrong message. It seems like on Facebook people try to convey a lot of emotion, but the tools aren't there yet.
I think that emotion is the future of social. We've tried to do some interesting things. In social applications, you basically have some type of content that you can post, and then you can get feedback on it. And we tried to do some. We actually call the feature emotion. Our feedback feature is called emotion, and the reason why is that we try to do a slightly better job. It's not a great job, but it's a slightly better job at mapping the emotional sort of feedback that you might receive from a piece of content. And so, we have 5 different smile types. We actually, there's a researcher at UCSF that specializes in faces. Malcolm Gladwell talked about it in the book Blink. Turns out there's about 8 core human emotions. There's a lot of human emotions, but there's 8 or so that they kind of all collapse down into. And so we actually chose 5 of the 8 because we wanted less of the other ones in the world. So
Anger.
Yeah, it was, the ones we didn't do were anger and anxiety. And then belief was the 8th one. Not spiritual belief, but Sarah, you're going on stage. I believe in you. Or you're going on you're running a marathon. I believe you'll do a good job. Turned out to be hard to turn that one into a smiley.
What about a looking off into the distance?
Yeah.
Back pat.
Or I don't know.
That looked like I'll get you. Don't do that.
The subtler thing, though, that I would point out is we created this feedback feature that we call it Seen It, for lack of a better way to describe it. But this idea that you sort of can know who has seen every one of your posts. Mm-hmm. And the idea there is the same as I'm looking here, I'm looking here. You sort of, a big part of communication in person is that you're looking at the person. And so we kind of wanted to replicate that just slightly better. Mm-hmm. The idea that we limit the number of people that you can connect to, and that, we talk a lot about the family dinner table and home, and this ability to be vulnerable and to feel like Path is a place you can trust and a place that you won't be judged. What we hope is that enables people to actually share a higher value, emotionally charged content. Like a few days ago, I was sharing on Path, I'm really stressed today, right? And it was neat because my family responded from Montana. It's cool, everything will be okay. That belief thing, right? Mm-hmm. And that's sometimes those really charged emotional moments are incredibly hard to share anywhere else. Yeah. And so I think you have to both create the context where it feels safe to do that, and then also give the users some tools to express those emotions. And so we even do things like, we've created this music feature, and I think people use music to express emotion a lot, and photos obviously, but we actually called our thing a thought, right? And a thought is often related to emotions, right? And so we actually want to find even more ways to weave it in. Video obviously communicates emotion really well, but I think that a lot of that's been relegated to chat services, and SMS. I think it's now sort of starting to come up into some of these sharing experiences too.
Why don't we do 2 more questions? You?
Okay. Hey, Dave.
Is that who I think it is?
It's Kevin Marks.
Hey, man, how are you?
You're good.
Don't worry, I'm not giving you shit about standards or anything. I was really interested in the emotional stuff here. You're talking about Ekman's work and faces. One of the things is, we've abstracted the faces into smileys so that we can express the emotions to people. But the other facial thing that we do all the time now is you have the face and the message, the Twitter stream, the Facebook stream, which helps us identify that person and see what they're saying.
Yeah.
But the only site I've seen that actually lets you express an emotion next to your message is Daily Booth, where you post something and then you can respond with a photograph of your face and your comment.
Yep.
And that seems something that would fit really strongly with what you're doing there.
Totally.
Be able to actually look back at the person and do that. And yet, they can be overperformed and a bit theatrical, but I think that can get you to that nuances that is saying, I'm supporting you more.
Yeah, I thought it would be kind of fun to just snap the camera when you open a photo. But we might get in trouble for that.
Someone talk you out of that.
Yeah. No, but
But people are more
sorry,
used to performing
all
into the
joking
camera.
aside.
If you watch, I watch my children use Facebook and they're sitting there going, and they're waiting 15 minutes to get the right facial expression that they want to send through.
It's really interesting. Like the other thing about emotion is that it involves sound a lot of time. And so one of the other neat things that the phone provides is the opportunity to get sound involved. And like, have you guys used this app Clear? It's a to-do app. Really neat, cool touch interface. And they actually have great sounds. And so I totally agree with you. We should probably make it a lot easier for you to sort of represent your actual face through the interface somehow. But I also think going beyond that, even like sound is a really interesting thing to consider on mobile, just because the thing usually has its speaker on and there's like cool things you can do there. But yeah, we should certainly think about that if you want to come help us design it.
All right, one more question.
Hi, is it on?
Yes.
I'm really interested in a bit on how your products evolved, because you talked a lot today about the family and friends and the dinner table. And when you guys first launched, it was an asynchronous followership where you had like only 50 people that could be on your path, and you had to invite them via email. And I know at that time, when I tried it out, I had a problem because I did try to invite my 50 closest friends, but most of them weren't all on iPhones. So that was a huge problem for me. You made the shift, and now you've expanded it to 150 people. And I was kind of interested in how you came to that conclusion with about 10,000 daily users. If you had 10,000 daily users, how did you come to the conclusion that you needed to open that up to have share with a larger group of people? Was that partially related to you bringing in the Facebook suggestions for friends to follow? Do you see yourself expanding that, or has that now made Path a sort of noisier place with a little bit less intimate, less family? I'm just curious, since you've touched on family so much.
So there's a couple things. We tried this model, which I can't see you. Oh, there you are. I'm trying to look at you. We tried this model, this asynchronous sharing model, where it was sort of like sharing and sharers versus following and followers. And it turned out that it was really hard to explain, and it was really hard to design an interface, and the cognitive dissonance that users had in trying to understand, like, okay, I'm sharing with these people, but I can't see their stuff, but they can see mine. It was a little bit hard. And so one of the decision points that we came to when doing Path 2 was like, okay, should we just use a model that's a best practice that people, that the world actually really understands? And if you looked at everyone talking about Path, they said, oh, Path is the place where you can have 50 friends, right? And we were like, okay, we think that the world understands a friend as this idea that sort of Facebook and Friendster before it and MySpace sort of popularized, where it's like you send someone a request, you accept it, and then there's one list, right? Rather than 2 lists or 3 lists or whatever. And so we kind of made this choice where we were like, okay, we just need to go with the normal model because this fancy model just isn't working. So that was like a big thing for us, the switch to just sort of a normalized, social friend model. The goal was always to sort of, we always knew that 150 was the cognitive limit, and I actually tend to use myself as a guinea pig in social systems. I did this actually a lot in Facebook, and it caused a lot of problems for me.
Go on.
Yeah. And so what a few of us were doing at Path, where we were testing Path at certain, at 50, at 100, 150, 300, then unfriending everyone, seeing what would happen to us socially. It's really uncomfortable. And just sort of going through the research process of seeing, what feels healthy. At what point does my brain feel like I don't understand what's going on, or who's out there? We were also looking at data, what's the average number of friends people are connected to. With Path 1, it was really low. It was 1 for a while, and then it was 3. And so 50 was clearly constraining the network way too much. And so we figured, the number is supposed to be 150, so we should probably just do that. And a bunch of us were testing it at about 100, and it felt really good, felt really healthy. And so we just made the decision to switch it. And now we're actually pretty happy because the average number actually is between 8 and 10, which is what we wanted to achieve anyway. If you look at Dunbar's research, it actually says that people have around 5 to 8 best friends. Then they have about 15 to 20 close friends, and then about 50 friends, as it were. And then there's about 150 people in your life that are kind of personal relationships, and that's the stable amount. And so I guess the third answer to your question is the way we look at it is not necessarily that we put this limit on you, but that it's our responsibility to use technology to get you connected to the exact 150 that matter to you right now, not necessarily like the 150 you choose today. And so, we're doing a lot of things with machine learning and algorithms, and just like we recommend people to in the new user experience over time, we want to, I think of it as, if you're a Path user, you probably have people that are waiting to come in, right? And I think of it as that we're actually a really bad bouncer right now. And people have these lines trying to get in, and we're not helping you manage that very well. And so we need to use technology and create simple experiences to help you manage that list in a way that you can trust, because I feel that that's sort of one of our eminent problems, one of the most eminent problems in the whole space. It's been solved by lists and circles and lots of different ways to think about it. We just want you to be connected to one list of people, and we want it to be the right list of people always, and we don't want to cause too much of a social catastrophe around you. And so I think that's a hard problem, and it's going to require big data, it's going to require UI, and we'll just keep going.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sorry.
She had a follow-up.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Part of the reason why I was interested in the switch from 50 to 150 was because you're using the timeline, even like a Twitter feed, where
Yep.
it's continuous and without filtering. And I was wondering if that's becoming a problem, or if you're noticing that's becoming a problem for people, because the more people you start to get connected, the noisier it is.
We found that the noise level, even at 150, isn't too bad. And there's certainly some, we went through about 25 iterations of the feed when we redesigned Path for Path 2. And there's still problems with it. If you have a lot of friends that wake up at the same time, you get a lot of those stories in a row. We can certainly do a lot better with the feed, and we're working on that. But our goal is actually to never filter the feed. We want every story to be worth reading. and to have you be connected to the right set of people so that we don't have to filter the feed. Because we really, the real-time nature to us really matters. And so, you know, the goal is to make sure that that stays healthy and doesn't get too noisy.
Okay. Two very quick things, then one announcement, and then you guys can grab beer and pizza on the way out if you want. Why was Britney Spears at your office?
I promised that exclusive to someone else, Sarah.
She tweeted about it.
Yeah. So we're working with Britney. She's.
I didn't say a word. I just want the record show.
No, I know. She tweeted about it. She's an old.
You're old friends with Britney Spears. Were you also in the Mickey Mouse Club?
No. She did a lot of stuff for us at Facebook. And she's actually never come to Silicon Valley. So it was actually really special to me that she came to Path and like met with us, and we talked about creativity and building things and all this kind of stuff. And it was pretty interesting. And she's actually very innovative and interested in new technology. And she was one of the first people on Twitter, and she's early on Facebook. She was actually, I think, our second artist, if not, she might have been our first artist on Facebook. We actually did some interesting things at Facebook where she had some back when Facebook had virtual GIFs, she had a bunch of custom virtual GIFs. So she's always willing to try interesting things. And so she's actually got a Path account. She has 150 friends. And apparently they're going to keep doing that. It was interesting. I didn't expect it to be. I expected them to come and say, "Well, we want to have millions of people connected to her," and they're like, "No, we just want to keep the 150." And I was like, "Oh, that's pretty interesting." And so they're probably going to rotate fans in and out of her 150. And
so it's fans. It's not friends, really.
Fans.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So they kind of are treating it like a club or something. That's super early, but
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's super early, brand new idea.
Twitter.
Yeah, brand new idea, but that's what they're interested in doing. So I'm interested to see how it plays out. And so she's been tweeting from her Path account. It's pretty bonkers.
The last thing I want to ask you, so we have this daily list, weekly list that we're doing. Amanda just had a stroke somewhere in the building when I said daily. The weekly list that we're doing, we decided we have sort of our Pando version of the Proust questionnaire, where we have
Of the what?
The Proust questionnaire. That's
No.
What's your favorite swear word? James Lipton always does it on Inside the Actors. God, you don't get outside of a computer, do you?
I've got nothing.
It's in the back of Vanity Fair.
I've seen behind the music, but not yet.
So they ask these same questions that Proust came up with, and it's
cool.
So anyway, we have a very short 5-question Pando version that I'm not going to ask you all 5 of because frankly I've forgotten them. But the one that's my favorite that Amanda came up with is, if you could have one mediocre superpower, what would it be? Now, I'll give you Amanda's and I'll give you mine.
What are examples?
So I'll give you Amanda's example and I'll give you mine. Amanda's is to never be cold getting out of the shower.
A real superpower is flying?
But like a mediocre
or like invisibility.
Amanda's other one is to be
or
immediately
like the hero thing where I could freeze everyone.
Be immediately in her seat on the airplane and not have to stand on land. Mine, which is, sorry, it's kind of gross, but if anyone's had a baby, you would agree, to actually not have to get up to go to the bathroom. Just pee's gone. You just think about it.
Afterwards or before?
No. You don't have to get up, and when you have to pee, you just snap your fingers and your bladder's empty.
That's a pretty good.
I wasted so much productivity going back to the bathroom.
That's a pretty good superpower.
So, what would yours be?
Oh, I have to get pretty creative.
We're all not leaving until you come up with something.
I know. I got to come up with something really interesting.
I can do an
What
announcement.
are the good examples?
I gave you 3. What is a daily annoyance in your life?
Never lose an umbrella.
Do you lose umbrellas a lot?
A daily annoyance. Let's see. I think if I could it would have to be something to do with time or something. Yeah, maybe if I could just not have to drive to work.
Mm-hmm. Beam to work.
Just instantly move between meetings without, because Yeah, because that like 15 minutes where you have to like, you know, leave the last thing and get to the next thing, it's always insanely stressful, right? Because you don't want to be late, and then you are late, and then
Beaming between meetings.
yeah, beaming between meetings. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
This has been amazing. I'm so happy all of you came. I appreciate everyone coming who, and you, Dave, especially. You did not have to do this, and it was wonderful, and I appreciate it. Next month we have Peter Thiel, same spot. Tickets will go on sale probably about a week before. If you want to make sure you have a ticket, you can buy an annual pass. I do not know who our May guest will be yet, but in June is Ben Horowitz. So we have some good people coming up. So please come back next month and grab more pizza and beer on the way out. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.